And I do hope that it will be possible to move towards a comprehensive deal, which would include comprehensively dealing with the sanctions issues as well. There has been some sanctions relief. I think that's important. I think it's very important now, and I take it for granted that will happen, that there will be, according to the agreement, the sanctions relief, that Iran will respect its obligation, and that this will provide the opportunity for moving forward with the comprehensive deal and also more comprehensive dealing with the sanctions issue.
خانم سیسیلیا از Swedish Broadcasting.
From Swedish Broadcasting.
Foreign Minister Zarif, many of us follow you on Twitter and Facebook, and so do many Iranians, because they're very clever at using proxies. And I have even been instructed by members of your staff how to download the app Siphone so that you can access Facebook. When will Iran stop filtering the internet?
Well, it's a complicated issue, and there are various views that need to be taken into account in order to deal with that. There are those in Iran, and if we represent a democracy which is responsive to the wishes of the populace, there are those in Iran, quite a few, if not an overwhelming majority, but quite a few, who have always insisted that the government has a responsibility to deal with profanity, with pornography, with misuse of the internet, and therefore there is a need to have certain controls over it. Now, we may have differences of views, and the government is engaged in a dialogue with all the various elements, various tendencies and inclinations in Iranian society, and we hope that through dialogue we can build mechanisms so that while people have access to information, we can have what is seen by many in this country as necessary protection of the morality, the ethics, and the institutions of our society that are so dear to a lot of Iranians.
خانم امیر چخماقی از خبرگزاری مهر به عنوان
Ms. Amir Chakma from Mehr News Agency has the last question.
سلام خسته نباشید.
Greetings.
من یه سوال از
I got
خدمت
a
آقای
question
ظریف
for
دارم،
Mrs. Zarif and one for
آقای وزیر خارجه سوئد.
the Swedish Foreign Minister. My question for you, Mr. Zarif, is that American officials have announced that Mr. John Kerry, in a meeting he had with you, has said that sanctions will be pursued on the part of America. My question is, what are the demands for you that was raised by the U.S. official, if you could tell us details? And my question for the respected Swedish Foreign Minister is that Iran and P5+1 have come to an agreement regarding Iran's nuclear issue. American officials have time and again militarily threatened Iran. And we are witness to the fact that there are some also rumors regarding even escalation of sanctions in America. The continuation of this can kind of disrupt the trend of negotiations. What's your advice? What do you recommend to these extremist elements inside America?
There are, and I would guess this applies to Iran as well, there are in the different Western countries different views on policies to be pursued versus Iran. And there are also highly divergent views on the nuclear deal. I mean, there are those in the United States and elsewhere who think this gives far too many concessions to Iran. And there is at least one country that you might be aware of that is saying that very explicitly, that this has been far too generous to Iran, this particular deal. So there's a vigorous debate. But I think you should obviously concentrate on what I'm convinced is the determination of the EU3, supported by the other three, including the US administration, to seek a fair and balanced comprehensive deal. I have no doubts of the determination of the Obama administration to do its utmost to achieve that. Then there's got to be all sorts of other views expressed in the American debates, as I would expect that there are people in the Iranian, both the known and the somewhat less visible debate, that questions a lot of these things. So it is the duty of the diplomats to go ahead and do the right thing in spite of the voices that might be there who favor other policies.
Well, regarding the question you asked me, well, in a meeting that Mr. Kerry had with me, we mostly focused on the manner of pursuit of negotiations and coming to a comprehensive agreement. Mr. Kerry, as the respected Swedish foreign minister also noted right now, Mr. Kerry stressed that the U.S. administration is committed to pursuing the case and is serious to do that, and that at once things to come to some conclusion. And he also he referred to concerns inside America, one of them being the fact that in America they are worried that through this interim deal, all the sanctions are just falling apart. And that this is a concern on the part of Americans, and we can also see this, that this concern is there. They are concerned, and well, of course we said that they have been illegal, all these sanctions from day one. They have never helped solve the issue. We have said that time and again, and the result of the sanctions have been 18,000 centrifuges that were added and incorporated into the system. But the fact of the matter is that further pessimism on the part of Iranian people regarding a policy that have caused even the purchase of food and medicine by the people and by Iranian companies face obstacles and impediments. Well, we hope that with the first phase of sanctions, these will be lifted and removed. I also stress the fact that we believe that the sanctions are both illegal and inconclusive, that America needs to change its outlook and approach and the view, and needs to pursue to find a solution instead of applying pressure, because pressuring Iran will not be fruitful. And also the need to stick to the words and contents that we agree upon, that the texts that we agree upon are agreed by both sides. We need to stick to them and feel committed. We should not publish third content in agreements and use them as basis. This is not legal. It cannot be a point of reference, nor realistically. So what's being executed these days is the common agreement that we came to on November 24th in Geneva under the title of Joint Action Plan. And then later on, there were some agreements that we made on the implementation of that agreement, and it has nothing to do with the documents that are being spread out by the White House. And I insist that to use this opportunity for confidence building, or at least reducing the level of lack of trust that has been in place for the past few decades. So it requires both sides to feel committed to those texts and agreements that were negotiated on and agreed upon by the negotiators, and avoid publishing other documents and use them as a source. Hopefully, this, with the start of the talks, part of which will be in a few days between me and Ms. Ashton, and another day, the day after, there will be an official meeting between Iran and the EU3 or +3, as our friends here say, or as you say, P5+1. Maybe it's easier to say 6, group of 6. And that's what our Arab friends say. They say group of 6. They never say EU3+3 or P5+1. They easily say group of 6. So the group that we just negotiated with us anyway, on 18th of February, we'll start serious negotiations to come up with a final solution. And a final solution is a part which cannot be forgettable. The part that cannot be forgotten is the removal of all sanctions. If anyone talks about negotiations to go on with sanctions in place, that's not true. The result and the conclusion of the meeting should be the removal of all sanctions and set the stage for a better logical game between the players in this area. Hopefully, we will witness the same thing and experience it. Thank you very much, everybody.
press conference there that you were just watching is between the Swedish Foreign Minister Carl Bildt and, of course, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif talking to the reporters there. In terms of the highlights, the Foreign Minister Zarif said that he had very good discussions with Carl Bildt, have not had a chance to discuss regional developments like in Afghanistan and in Syria. The bulk of it, he said, at this point were discussions that were made between the Swedish Foreign Minister on Iran's nuclear deal, the recent nuclear deal of which the interim deal was signed, of which he said they discussed that along with political dimensions. Also said Mohammad Javad Zarif that they talked about human rights, which would help mutual understanding, especially in the framework of human rights in terms of how it is exercised within the framework of international law. Promises made by the President and the government during the election campaign is something that the current government is going to follow through. In terms of the meeting at the Munich Security Conference with Kerry, when asked about how the U.S. has time and again used the all options rhetoric, Mohammad Javad Zarif said that the U.S. is committed to the nuclear deal. He said some of the U.S. are worried about the sanction regime being lifted. And he said that even though these sanctions are illegal, we're looking for a final deal that is not going to violate any of the rights that Iran has for its nuclear developments in terms of research, for example, but ultimately that the U.S. should change its stance. Now, regarding the Foreign Minister Carl Bildt and some of the statements he made there, it's important to know that a Swedish Foreign Minister has not made a visit to Iran since the year 2002, which is what the Swedish Foreign Minister said. Talked about the nuclear issue at length, of which he said that he is convinced there is goodwill on both sides and that it is possible within the framework of 6 months for this to be finalized. And he said that he expects from the U.S. A fair and balanced final deal that's going to be beneficial to both sides. The mere fact that the Swedish Foreign Minister is in Iran is very important in terms of it developing bilateral ties between the two countries. Just some of the highlights there of this important press conference.